Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar titled AI-Driven Marketing Mix Modeling. My name is Patrick Moran. I'm on the marketing team here at H2O.ai. I'd love to start off by introducing our speakers. Akhil Sood is Associate Director at Marketing Sciences at Allergan. Akhil worked with the marketing analytics team in Allergan and supported different product teams by answering their business questions using secondary data. These questions can range from simple data cuts to more complex analyses, including ROI measurement, MMX, lookalike model development, and identifying undiagnosed patients. On a day-to-day basis, he utilized different data sources, including IQVIA sales data, patient claims data, and occasionally EMR data. While some of the projects are inclined to machine learning and more advanced analytics, the end goal is always to understand how these projects can make a positive impact on business. Vijay Raghavan is Associate Vice President at Marketing Sciences at Allergan. Vijay heads up the CNS Insights and Analytics team for AbbVie. Their primary function is to look at large data sets to understand important variables that drive business. Using these variables, they identify appropriate physicians and patients and the profitability of marketing programs. Their focus is to look at analytics as a revenue driver versus as a cost center. Vijay has over 20 years of experience in pharma marketing and sales analytics and previously worked as a management consultant and financial analyst. Dr. Michael Proksch is a Senior Director at H2O.ai. He is currently the Senior Director of Customer Data Science at H2O.ai. He is connecting with customers on the data science team and data science and business side, working with data scientists in the C-suite to drive business value with AI and advanced analytics. Michael holds a PhD in economics, was an academic researcher at top universities in Australia, Singapore, and Germany before he switched to industry. He has several years of experience in data science and management consulting, working for the Fortune 100 companies in Asia, Europe, and the US, and as a principal data scientist at CVS Health and Aetna before joining H2O.ai. Now, before I hand it over to the speakers, I'd like to go over the following housekeeping items. Please feel free to send us your questions throughout the session via the questions tab in the console. We'll be happy to answer them towards the end of the webinar. This webinar is being recorded. A copy of the webinar recording slide deck will be made available after the presentation is over. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Michael.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Patrick, and thank you so much for joining us on that session today. We picked a very interesting topic, and I've been working on that topic for many years as a researcher and then later in industry, and it has never been really solved because it's a really complex one, and that's attribution modeling, and especially in marketing. Right, and I have two colleagues today on with me, and this is Akhil and Vijay. And I'm really excited that I got to convince them that they're talking to me about the topic. And how did we get to that topic? Actually, we started on early this year, end of last year, working on marketing mix optimization, and we try to optimize what we have done in the past, and that's something we want to share with you today, and want to get your feedback and want to see how you're doing it and where you see opportunities to use that new technology we want to present. So yeah, Akhil and Vijay, I don't know, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. We are online, Michael.
Hey. Oh, perfect. So yeah, maybe you want to say a couple of words before we start, how we get together and how we got to that topic.
Sure, I will start and then I will pass this to Akhil. This is Vijay Raghavan. I work for a pharmaceutical company called AbbVie, and one of our primary responsibilities is to look at large data sets and try to find patterns. It could be like revenue, financial analysis of a marketing program, or to figure out which doctors to target and so on. We began our journey with H2O several years back, and we got the product, and along the lines we started to get the benefit of interacting with Michael, who really like jump-started our data science work. And in this webinar, we're happy to present like how we actually changed the traditional marketing mix that we're using right now today with linear regression, all those things, to using a machine learning approach that really like saves a lot of time, and we're able to uncover new insights.
Cool.
Hi everyone, this is Akhil. I also work with Vijay in the CNS secondary analytics team, and like Vijay mentioned, our team works on different sort of analysis, but from past few months, we have been moving more towards machine learning for budget allocation and marketing mix.
Cool, thank you. As I said, I've been working with the marketing attribution for many, many years, and it has always been a hassle, and it has always been problematic. Why is that, Vijay and Akhil? You work closely with business, and I would love to get your insights. Why is that so important to do this attribution modeling for marketing operations?
So, Michael, I will start and then I'll let Akhil finish. I think the key piece is we spend a lot of investments on different marketing channels. Back in the day, it used to be the sales force or the reps. Then TV came along with the whole expansion into like digital. We now have banner ads, we have YouTube, we have Facebook, and especially with respect to COVID now, our reps cannot reach these doctors. We have to contact them through digital channels. And always the question has been how good our tactics working, how much to invest. And as much as these regression models are really good, we still have to figure out, we have to constantly improvise ourselves to be able to get a correct read of it. I agree with no model is perfect, but this is like an ongoing challenge to be able to attribute what's going on, because we cannot conduct like an experiment like clinical trials where you can set up like randomized control and test groups, because no marketer wants to say that I want to hold back 50% of my customers to see what's going on. So we have to have other techniques, even while approximate or correct, to be able to do this better.
Right.
And just to add on to Vijay, like of course the key aspect is to really say if your investment is working. But yeah, other challenge is generally that all these channels or all these marketing tactics, they work with one another. They are not acting in silo. Like we are running, let's say, a digital campaign on Facebook and let's say a campaign on television. So we do want to accurately measure both of them, but it has always been challenging. We have to apply different functional format or manipulate data in different formats just so we can start to understand what is the impact of each of these channels.
So when we talk about this attribution modeling, and just to give it a little bit insight about the outcome of it, so what do we do with it? So I mean, we talked about how we do it and the challenges we're facing, but why do we do it?
I mean, why we have to do it, Michael, is basically we are investing money on marketing campaigns, right? The idea is to improve sales. We want to be able to find how much to invest in what tactics so that we can drive sales efficiently in a profitable manner.
Okay, so we try to optimize budgets in the marketing field. In a way, yes. Right? Between all the different channels. And if we go even more holistically, right, not just between channels, between customer groups, right, over time, geographically, and then if we go one step higher, even among brands, right, where to invest the most, right, where does it have the biggest impact, right? So it's a highly complex problem, right? It sounds easy and it sounds like you built a simple regression function for it, but it's more complicated, right?
Yes.
And I have to say, in all the over the last years, interacting with the industry and in all different kinds of customers, I see that the marketing department gets more and more under pressure, right? We face more and more questions of accountability for results, right? So that's another big problem, right? So it is hard in marketing to say, okay, we have an impact of X% on sales, right? That's not as simple as it sounds, right? You cannot really. It would be easy if you have a new customer, and the new customer would tell you, "Hey, I buy your product because I saw your TV campaign," right? Unfortunately, this type of attribution is mostly not available. And then even if you do that with market research or try to do that with market research, customers might not be able to answer that question, right? So they saw an online campaign, they saw Google AdWords, they saw the product in the store, they saw somewhere a discount for it, and they got aware of the product again, and then months later they're going to buy the product because of a TV campaign. So they don't even know what was the initial trigger to buy that product, right? And then when we talk about analytics, let's go a little bit deeper on the problems we're facing. So when we built this marketing attribution models, right? So what is so challenging about those models? And I don't want to go too detailed in the analytics space, but deep enough in order to see why we went on that journey to use a machine learning approach to fix those issues.
So, Michael, I'll start and then I'll let Akhil continue. So I think the regression models that we were using were good for like traditional tactics, like when we had just television and then we had like Salesforce. It seemed to work okay, but I think with the proliferation of all these digital channels, these digital channels are not really big channels. They are really small. You don't spend millions and millions of dollars. Once you put like 20 of those channels, we have problems in figuring out what is causing what, and these regression models started breaking down. And the problem why they were breaking down was you don't know the exact functional relationship, how one tactic influences the other, and to model all these different interactions out. That is where I think, in my opinion, that the machine learning journey has kind of really helped us, because it automatically kind of figures out how to model these interactions, and it runs hundreds and hundreds of models. Like you can run this by hand, it will take a long time to do.
Yeah.
Yes, I think Vijay pretty much covered it.
Okay. So, I mean, those are not just the only assumptions you make, right? You make assumptions about the functional form, and this could be, for example, to give an example, when we include the modeling of TV, right, and we model the impact of GRPs or dollar spend in the channel, right? We make assumptions about the functional form. So is it a linear function? Usually it is not, and we're going to show you later. So if I spend $1 or $100, is it then 100 times the impact of the sales I spend? I get out of the spending. This is something we try to figure out. Then we also make assumptions about a couple of other things that are not always correct. For example, in the past we have made assumptions about ad stock effect. So what does that mean? So for example, you have a TV campaign and you want to figure out the impact on a weekly basis. You might not see the impact of the TV campaign that runs on a Saturday within the same week. So you might see the impact on the week after, right? Because then people might buy the product. Or you don't see the full impact in the week after because the people didn't buy it, your customers didn't buy it within the next week. They bought it 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later. So you have a decreasing effect of your TV campaign over time. What we've done in the past, because the models were pretty complex, we made assumptions. We usually introduced a ad stock effect, which is a geometric decay function you put in your models in order to estimate the decrease in impact of TV. But this has been an issue in the past. So I saw it many times that those ad stock effects don't really reflect the real world, right? There could be that, as I said, you put this ad stock effect in the week when you had the Saturday campaign, and you estimate the highest impact within that week. But the problem is the highest impact comes the week after. or your sales don't get counted the right week. You have a so-called lag effect over time, which might be that you really count the sales maybe in 2 weeks, or based not on when the order comes in, based on delivery. Stuff like that. This is always an issue when you use ad stock effects, right? The other thing is, how do you estimate those ad stock effects, right? Vijay and Akhil, you have done that in the past, right? You came across those assumptions, right? How did you do that, and did it always work? Like, did you do that for all channels, or how did you make all those assumptions?
I will start again. I think what we did was we used to run like hundreds of models with different parameters for ad stock, and then try to find the model that has the best ad stock. But sometimes the model that, for example, fit the best with the highest R square or whatever parameters you are trying to, may have ad stock that is like not meaningful, and so we had to make judgment calls to pick maybe not the best model, but something significantly below the best model, so that it makes business sense and we get meaningful results.
Yeah, and I guess that's the biggest problem we are facing. That when business customers think just let the data speak, that's a it's a hard judgment, right? Because the data is not always 100% correct, right? First of all, and second of all, we don't sometimes know 100% how the data gets collected, right? It's a long ETL process through agencies and
Michael, can I just interrupt you on a minute? I think the key piece I would say is it's in marketing, unlike other aspects, the best model not always wins. It has to make business sense, and you have to be able to explain it in a clear way why this is correct, and it has to go with what their business instincts are. You just can't say like toggle competition. All we care about is the best fit. That doesn't really work in marketing.
Yeah, I agree. You actually try to optimize two things, right? You optimize the accuracy of a model in one way in order to show that your model is correct, but on the other hand, you try to optimize the business sense, right? Which makes it really complicated, right? Because what does business sense really mean, right? And then I guess another thing, and I really want to go through it because it's an important piece. It's like, how have you worked with the interactions in the past, right? And that's something that's really complex and complicated in marketing analytics.
Akhil, do you want to take that question?
Yes, sure. So, Michael, you're right. Of course, there are, like, just to validate the previous point, yes, we have to make models that are generally not, like, that generally fits the business narrative rather than looking at the most accurate model. And when we come to interactions, of course, we do understand that all these channels interact with one another, be it personal, promotion, or TV. And we have to experiment with the different interactions effect. We know that all of them do interact, but which of these interactions are significant? For that, in the traditional sense, when we are building, let's say, linear regression models, we have to try separate models, each with different set of interactions, and understand which interactions are more significant based on whatever metric, be it p-value or something else, and then just experiment until we get good results.
Yeah, and
so Michael, I just want to add one more point. So I think as Akhil is describing, so you add all these different terms and you get all these coefficients from regression. But ultimately, once you have all of that, right, you still have to come up with an optimal budget for a tactic. It is hard to explain interaction with the customer or to collapse these interaction terms into like the primary tactic stuff, right?
Yeah.
They really like to know if I change one metric, what happens. Of course, that there is an effect by itself. There's an effect that happens if there influence other tactics, right? But everything has to be collapsed to one metric or one response curve. That piece is not that straightforward with the regression model. Shapely values with which I know you're going to talk about makes it more easier.
Yeah, and I think that's an important piece as well, right? As you mentioned, we aggregate, right? We reduce the complexity of the problem we are facing. right? And then we aggregate brands, we aggregate stores, we aggregate channels sometimes, right? We aggregate online channels to one big online channel, but that might not be correct, right? Because whenever you aggregate, whenever you build a mean or a sum, you face the problem that you lose information, right? There could be 5 different channels or 5 different stores, and it works very well in one store, but not in the others, right? So I think that this is another important piece when we build those regressions and the traditional marketing approach. We had to do it because otherwise, when you spend, I don't know how long you spend on those models, but I spend a long time building 1 or 2. But if you have to build that for every state, or if you have to build that for every store type, or on a specific customer, in your case specialties, then you just can't do it because of the time and resources constraints you have, right?
Yeah, I agree with you, Michael.
Okay, cool. So I think something we used, and let's get to the next stage. We actually used an H2O product, which is called Driverless AI, and we used which is our AutoML solution to model relationships and customer responses based on the different marketing channels, and we use Shapley value attribution in order to attribute back to sales. And I don't want to go too deep in that topic, but I just want to mention the advantages of doing that, right? So while we have used linear models or GLM models in the past and put in polynomial functions in order to get a specific functional form, the newer approaches, and especially decision tree approaches, and it doesn't have to be light GBM, could be random forest too, they help you to not make this assumption because they're actually breaking the variables down and help to reflect nonlinear relationships, and we're gonna talk about that in a minute. They also help you by design to build interactions between variables. So, for example, you could have a TV campaign, and what we usually do, we run online campaigns at the same time because it's a specific general campaign you try to run, right? That could be a pricing campaign, that could be a specific branding campaign, that could be a new product launch, whatever. So you combine different marketing channels with each other, and you want to still want to see the individual impact, but also the impact of the interaction of those channels, right? That is something that has always been really hard. Or, for example, evaluating pricing in this constellation, right? Do you attribute the impact on sales based on the discounted price or based on marketing, right? Or you have different customer groups, right? How do you model that? So in a decision tree or in a decision tree based algorithm, for example, the GBM, you have this included, right? And I just refer to an article here from Towards Data Science, Gradient Boosting Decision Tree Algorithm Explained. You're welcome to read more about it or read about the documentation from H2O. I don't want to go too deep in the algorithm itself, just wanted to talk about the advantages we're having. Another important piece to what we took into account was how do we, when we have this model, when we have this the final model we want to use, we can evaluate the accuracy of this model, and usually those GBMs are pretty accurate. But how do we get the attribution correct, right? Because that has always been a problem. How do you attribute it? And we cannot just attribute it on a global level, like, okay, we get out of a random forest or GBM that price is important. We want to know that on a really granular level for each, in case of Allergan, for each provider, right? And want to see what contributed to the prediction of sales, right? Was it the price? Was it the 5 promotion calls? Was it the TV campaign that was just running last week? Was it the online campaign on Facebook or right? And that's something when we went through the different methodologies, we decided to go with Shapley value. Shapley value is based on a concept from Lloyd Shapley, and he was a mathematician and economist, code breaker in World War II. He actually introduced it a long time ago, and he won the Nobel Prize in 2012 for it. But it was translated into the machine learning space, and that makes it very interesting. So it comes from game theory, and it actually answers the question, so how can we attribute a contribution from an element in a game, from a specific player on a team, to the outcome of that game, right? And that is something Shapley value developed, and I don't want to go in detail. You're welcome to read the article about it, and I reference it here, to really understand how Shapley value does it, how the Shapley value methodology does it. The interesting part is that it is a unique method that allows kind of like the linear regression, how we would do it there, with in a slightly different method, like totally different methodology, but you get to the comparable results. And that makes it so important. It is really close to the type of human decision-making you would make. And we actually wrote two blog articles about it, and you're welcome to have a look at that. There's also a Python script reference on GitHub, where you can really see when we modeled the linear relationships and nonlinear relationships and the interactions between predictors, you can really see how both types of models behave, right? The linear models and the GBM models, and how we refer that back, how we do attribution based on Shapley values. And you will get to really, really interesting results. The result is, and I just have a short overview here. When we run linear relationships, and we created a data set that reflects a linear relationship between a predictor, that could be marketing, TV campaign, and sales, right? And we wanted to see, and we wanted to compare linear models and GBMs, right? And wanted to evaluate the incremental impact, right? So what we created was a data set where we said, okay, the impact has to be 500 coins, right? Whatever the predictor is needs to show 500 coins in the attribution. So we can see at the end that both models are highly accurate, right? Down here, you can see that both models have a 0% error. We made it by intention. And both say that the predictor has an impact of 500 coins. This is a linear relationship. So we can see that both models get to the same result when we have a linear relationship. But we already said that in the real world space, relationships are usually not linear, right? We have nonlinear relationships. And that's what we created too. So we created another data set where we said, okay, the real answer needs to be 540 coins. And you can see that both models show a slight error, but both models come to really different results. The old GLM, the general linear model we would create, gets to the wrong answer in attributing the results. So instead of attributing 540 coins to our marketing channel, it only attributes 503. So when you now calculate the return on investment, you would see that the marketing channel would fall short, right? The GBM with our Shapley values attributed 540 correctly. And the last version we tried when we said, okay, how do we do now interaction? So we have now nonlinearity covered. So now let's cover interaction between predictors. Those are the two areas where GBM needs to be better than our traditional models, right? And we did the same thing. We created two variables in this case where their combined contribution was 3,000 coins. And we can see that the GLM model is far off from the accuracy compared to the GBM, but also from the attribution of the incremental impact. So both channels show in the GLM model 3,714 coins, but the GBM shows 3,000, which is the correct answer. So we can see not just that in the linear example that both methodologies are equal, like we can compare them with each other. They're totally comparable, and we have those two blog articles exactly about that. But we can also see that the GBM is performing way better in the other two examples that are really important for us. Akhil and Vijay, you also, like, you didn't trust me at the beginning, right? I came in and said, hey, I have this great methodology, and we're going to revolutionize your marketing sciences. But I mean, of course, you didn't say, hey, yeah, let's do it. You wanted to check, right? So you run the comparison for right.
Michael,
so
I will
maybe you can
on this one. I think what we did here is we actually set up experimental data on like some simple campaigns. Like let's just say we have two tactics, television and radio. We wanted to see, and we made up the data just to make sure that we get correct answers from this GBM Shapley concept. We turned television on in one case. We had, as Michael was saying, an impact of X. We turned radio on. We created an impact of Y. And then we turned both on. We created an impact that is greater than X plus Y. We knew what those were. We wanted to test this. We ran through this whole process of testing that piece to make sure we were getting the correct answer, and also, in addition to that, how to interpret these Shapley values. That was more important to us, so that when we actually run the model, the full-blown model, we really know how to use those in our tactics.
Yeah, what was the outcome?
The outcome was, I would say that we were able to, like, confirm this piece of it, Shapley values being more accurate. But the whole idea for me was, the accuracy is important, but the whole piece that I described is with the interaction effects, you don't have to really define those interaction effects. It automatically calculates that for you. Without specifying all those terms, it figures that combinations out. Akhil, you want to add any additional?
Yes. So in addition to the dummy test case that Vijay mentioned, we also tried both traditional linear mix approach, linear modeling approach, as well as GVM plus Shapley approach for one of the campaign that we ran. And we found that the results of both these analyses were very, very comparable, very similar to each other. So that kind of validated, or that kind of gave confidence to us that rather than spending more time on building linear regression models, we could also try GPM models or more machine learning models with less tuning, or which require less tuning, and could still give us accurate results.
So how long did it take you to build those linear models compared to the machine learning model? Roughly.
Linear models generally take time. Yeah.
Go ahead, Akhil.
Linear model generally takes time because we have to account for different interactions. So we did spend 2 to 3 weeks easily building the linear models, whereas when we ran the GVM-based models, it was pretty quick, like pretty much less than 1/3 of the time.
And the point there, like, the challenge was some of the newer channels, like the digital channels, or like engaging doctors through digital. We don't have, like, we have an idea, but we don't have that much of an idea of how the answers will be. Like, we know exactly what a TV campaign does. So building linear regression models pose additional challenges, especially for those tactics that are not highly scalable but have good ROI. But to how to correctly account for those, and especially modeling the interaction piece of that with other channels. This kind of automated that process for us.
Yeah. So I think that's another important piece, that, as I said, you figure you can model the impact of read signals too, right? So, but I mean, you also faced some problems, right? So it's not like it wasn't the magic ball It was like what were problems we were facing over time. So there's also some pitfalls, and we needed to adjust models here and there. So what did we do? Like, for example, we saw that when we modeled weak signals, the impact could be negative, right? So because it's really weak, right? We saw a small spending, and it's the same thing we see in GLM models. It's not unique to that method, but like something we worked on, right? And we want to be honest about that too, right? So it's not like
we want to be, I mean, there are things that you have to make, like seasonal adjustments, linearity, trend, all of those factors in, and then we also have to still do things like take one variable out, put one variable in, and the way we also have to validate this is on the weak effects. We have to look at to make sure the strong effects are correctly being captured, and we have a fairly good idea of what the strong effects should be. So all of those trial and error still happens, but the process is much more easier.
Yeah, I mean, we can, and that's an easy way. You can define monotonicity constraints too, right? So that's something we did after a while. We defined that some weak signals have to be positive, some other weak signals have to be negative. That really helped us in the estimation of those signals, right? Which are still pretty good at the end, but sometimes you need to help the algorithm to better understand some relationships here or there, right? So, and I think that's that shows up here very well. So those are the couple of results. So we have the TV, for example. We can really model nonlinearity, and I have seen that many times. That TV, for example, has a nonlinear relationship. I mean, it makes sense, right? If you only spend $50,000 in a TV campaign, it might run overnight, right, on a channel with a limited audience. Right, so the impact might be really low compared to high spending during prime time, right? So you might see that there's a huge difference, and this is going to kick off over time, right? Online, on the other hand, you might see an impact very early, right? Because you define how many people you want to reach by intention, by impressions, right? The only thing is, like, if you reach a specific amount, you see that then you reach that person more than once, or that target group too many times, so that the impact is going to decrease, right? That's something you might see. Something we didn't have to do is we didn't have to aggregate anymore. So as we said, we have a couple of really weak signals, maybe just a couple of events where we really ran that couple times over a year or two, where we really ran a specific marketing channel, and we were able to see those. And then you can see the interactions in total, right? You can see that TV and online spent together might have a beneficial impact. And one important thing, I guess that's also really important, you cannot just model the interactions between channels. You can model the interactions over time, or for different target groups, right? You could, for example, see that in the case of drugs, you have a cough medicine over the counter. To spend a lot of money in July might not be the best time to spend that money. The return on investment would be low because nobody has a cough, right? If you go in fall and winter and in spring, you see a difference, right? Which is then also another important piece, right? If you do analytics, you might actually want to account for things like that, right? I mean, you accounted for this in the area of geography, right?
Yes, I would like to add on the interaction piece. With a linear regression, you have to define all these interactions, but ultimately the question that would come is, if you want to do like localized investment, should I invest in this geography versus other geography? The nonlinear approach of the machine learning model makes it easier because you get like almost like a Shapley value per DMA, a direct marketing area. That will almost indicate to us this DMA is better to invest than the other DMA. You could kind of get there with linear regression, but it requires you to specify a lot of things upfront, and you have to really know how to do it. Whereas this one is like somebody who is new, who has some good business sense and who wants to model. could get easily up to speed and get like detailed granular insights. And we did find in our analysis that like we could parse the entire country into four unique, we could break the geographies into four groups. One set of geographies, personal promotion really worked, like actually sending sales reps, speaker programs. In another one, where we could really see customer channels really working. And then the two other subgroups are what type of personal channel, like reps or like speaker programs, or the other way would be more like around this digital work better or television work better. Akhil, do you want to add anything else?
No, Vijay, you covered it. But yeah, just to add on, the advantage of this approach is also like we could use Shapely value to segment different providers or different geographies and really understand not just the global impact of different promotion channels we ran, but the regional impact as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very important piece, right? We have usually when we plan media or budgets, which is, I mean, based on all different kinds of information you can collect, right? That was the previous approach in looking in the past, what have worked in the past, and so on. Or we use Nielsen models or other companies, and then we use if we do a more static allocation, but still aggregated in a way with the regression models that already gave us a better idea of where to invest in, and helps us to drive return on investment between different channels. But the last approach, and I call it temporal allocation, could be everything. Could be geography, could be customer segments, and as Akhil said, we actually clustered on top of those Shapley values, on top of those individual contributions to a sale for each provider. We could really figure out what are the best strategies for different customer groups, for different geographies, and maybe in your case, I don't know, over time. So yeah, I think that's already what
actually,
we.
Michael, I want to add one point on the overtime piece. Sure. So I think I want to add a business context to it. Like we had COVID, so one of the programs that we do is like speaker programs. And the question from the management happened was, look, how are you doing speaker programs? We don't really believe the answer. Using this piece, we could show that speaker programs happened in the earlier part of time. All the impact was attributed earlier. Down the road, we could actually see how the virtual programs took over, where we had online speaker programs. And you could actually see, even though overall speaker programs represented 20%, the face-to-face, most of it came from face-to-face in the earlier section. And in the later section, we could actually see the virtual programs, and we could show that trend over time.
Okay, yeah, that's a great example. Cool, that's true. Okay, do you have anything to add, Akhil and Vijay? So that was already what I had planned, and just, I mean, we use Driverless AI, right? Just as an idea, right? We use the H2O AutoML platform, which made it really easy for us to get all the information. And you're welcome to everybody who's listening to get a trial license for that on our H2O website. And now I would say we go with questions. Patrick,
Great. Yeah, we've got a number of great questions here from the audience. We'll try to get through most of them, time permitting. First question is, generally 2 years of data is required for MMM modeling. What's the minimum amount of data on which you can build marketing mix modeling, and can it build upon 6 months or 1 year of data?
Michael, can I take this question?
Yes, please.
So ideally, yes, you need 2 years of data to do a full marketing mix if you want to really be accurate in your ROI calculations. But what happens from a business sense is that, like, let's take you just recently launched a product, right? And let's just say you only have 6 months of data. Yes, I agree with you. You cannot do a full ROI. But in general, what we have done is we have still run like an MMM type solution using like Driverless AI to be able to identify approximately contributions by channel. That you can do with reasonable confidence, even with, like, we ran it with 26 weeks of data to be able to like understand, like, tactic 1 is generating 20%, tactic 2 is generating 3%, just to get an idea of what goes on and then make decisions based on that.
Yeah, I think that's true. But I also understand when you say you need 2 years, it really depends on the product you're having, right? If you think about a product with strong seasonality, right, then yes, it becomes more complex. Then you might want to have at least then it really depends, let's say that, right? If you want to evaluate which channel works better, then you need to have the channel attributed over time the same ways, right? If you only have TV over the summer and you have all online over the winter and you only have 6 months, then you might have a huge impact there. But if you have them equally distributed over time, then you might at least get a good comparison. You might not get a good overall return on investment calculation. That's correct, right?
All right. Next question is, can marketing mix modeling be built using daily data instead of weekly data?
So I will address it from a pharma perspective. So I can only speak from a, in a pharmaceutical world. We don't have daily data in the pharmaceutical world. It's the minimum grain that we have is weekly on the outcome side. On the independent variables, we do have daily level, but on the outcome in terms of like prescriptions, it's weekly. So
in general, I have built daily marketing mix models, so that's definitely possible. You just need to consider longer leg structures for the. So first of all, you need to have all the variables available on daily basis, right? Which is usually a problem in general, especially when you go in offline media, right? They are not necessarily available on daily basis, or you need to find relevant proxies that can measure that. But if you're going to go on daily basis, you need to extend the leg structure, and it comes with other challenges at the end, right? So I have good experience with weekly marketing mix models, and they're usually pretty accurate. With daily, it is more complex, right? But you definitely could get very accurate results on, like especially when you want to use that more real time. That's also possible. Not real time, let's say on a daily basis, and you want to evaluate if you should change a strategy or a campaign while you're running that campaign, then daily data might be very valuable, and you get very interesting results. But you need to be careful in comparing daily and weekly and so on. It makes it more complex.
Great. Next question is asking, will ad stock change over different TV campaigns that happen during the same year?
Oh, I can answer this. Yes, it can. Like in the sense that ad stock is looked at, it can change, and we do it using shapely values. So let's say a TV campaign ran in Jan might have a different impact for different providers and might have ad stock of let's say 0.5, whereas a TV campaign ran in summer might have a longer term impact, and therefore with respect to ad stock may have a different ad stock value. So using this approach, we can have different ad stocks, or we don't need to calculate, but we do observe different ad stocks for TV campaign ran in different parts of the year.
Yeah, I mean that's one variable. The other one is you have different campaigns that have like one campaign is a brand campaign, the other one is a pricing campaign, the other one is a launch of a new product feature, and they all have different ad stocks too, right? So that's then usually you need to run that individually. That might not be necessary with the machine learning approach. Right. But good question.
Okay. Wouldn't GBM assume that all interactions are IID? That would make it difficult to account for interactions over a long period of time.
That's a very good question. Do you want to reveal some secrets, Akhil or Vijay?
I would defer to you on this, Michael. So.
Okay, sure. So what we did, so we did not use autoregressive elements in our GBMs. We did not use a pure time series approach, because we actually implemented a trend variable that would account for differences over time. We also implemented seasonality variables that account for things like that. So it was an IID approach with time series elements. But this is something I have I did the same thing with, for example, JAMS models. And I built the same type of approaches before because it better reflects the true impacts as when you, for example, difference the target variable and take out trend and model a more time series based approach and put in autoregressive elements. Sometimes you do not really see the true attribution, or you cannot adjust it as well, right? You want to be able sometimes to adjust the impact of trend or the impact of seasonality in those models, if that makes sense. But I'm happy to discuss that topic further because it's a very, very, very good one and a very important one, and it requires a lot of knowledge about the industry and about results you're getting, and if those adjustments make sense or not.
Right. Is marketing mix modeling a modeling exercise or a goal-seeking exercise? For example, find me a model that best agrees with my business instincts, or give me a model consistent with the data that as it exists.
So can I address that? I'll address that question. I mean, because
Yeah.
I think this was related to a comment that I made earlier. So it is not, I wouldn't call it a goal-seeking exercise. So once again, I think the challenge has always been with marketing is there are programs that over the years we know what they do. Like television has this kind of impact. Sales reps have this kind of impact. And we observe it not through marketing mix, but we have a number of other ways to observe the effect of those, right? When you run a models like these, which are inherently black box, the answers coming out of that have to somehow corroborate with earlier experience. If it comes something new, it is possible that there is some artifact of the model or something that's causing that to happen. So we need to be able to investigate it and understand it. Sometimes, of course, what we get out of these models may not agree with our what we have observed previously through other means. That case, you have to really spend time, understand what's going on, and come up with a good explanation, because you cannot just go to your stakeholders, business stakeholders, and say this is what the model said. Nobody's going to believe you. So you need to create that credibility. You have to use experience. Of course, and sometimes these models come up with answers that may not be intuitive. We have to figure out and understand and explain. And these are econometric models. These are not like physics or chemistry where everything is precise.
Yeah, and sometimes that's a good point. You cannot really trust the data, right? Or if you're not aware of all the, sometimes you don't know every single artifact about the data, right? Could be quality, could also be, in the past I've built a model for a big fashion company, and we modeled the impact on sales for marketing, and we saw that, for example, radio had a return on investment of a couple thousand. So we had an investment of, I don't know, let's say $50,000, and the impact was a couple million sales, right? Which was totally ridiculous. Let the data speak. That didn't work in this case. After investigating, we figured out that at the same time there was the World Soccer Championship, and they were sponsoring the World Soccer Championship. So it was not the channel; it was the World Soccer Championship that was driving it. But we did not have this variable included. So you might want to. So if you just trust the data you have, you're gonna come up with possibly with the wrong results, right?
All right. Do you calculate ad stock for all media channels when using regression models?
So I can address that. I mean, the answer is it depends on the project. Some projects we do calculate all the channels. Some projects, if we need to quickly address the impact of one particular channel or two particular channels for a particular business question, then we just focus on that. So I would say it's a mix. Akhil, any comments on?
No, Vijay, you're right. Like if you have to calculate impact of one channel, then we do control for other channels, but of course focus on having the right ad stock for the channel in consideration.
I mean, there's also not every channel has an ad stock, right? So if you think about TV has an ad stock, right? Because it takes time to from the first time of going on air with a campaign to really get a sale, right? The display, outside display has an ad stock, right? Something like online might not have an ad stock because you click on there's a banner, you click on it, you buy or not. So that doesn't make sense that this has a 3-week ad stock, right? You have sales rep calls, they have an ad stock. So, but you need to evaluate if it makes sense or not to include an ad stock for a channel, right? Not every channel has it, and then they have different decays, right? A TV campaign might have an ad stock over 6 weeks, while a sales rep call might not have that, right?
All right. I think we're coming up on our final 2 questions here. Okay. Let's see.
I mean, we have 3 more minutes, right? Maybe one more, and then we wrap up. But hey, I love all the questions, so we're happy to if you have any questions, please write us afterwards. Send me an email at michael.proksch@h2o.ai, and I'm happy to discuss the details. So I'm passionate about that topic, so I'm happy to go deeper on that one.
All right. So how about we wrap up with this? How do you perform forward-looking optimal budget allocations with the GBM-based model, since Shapley value gives contributions based on historical spend?
Okay. Can you read that again?
Sure. How do you perform forward-looking optimal budget allocations with a GBM-based model, since Shapley values gives contributions based on historical spend?
So, Michael, do you want me to address that question?
Yeah, sure.
So I think whether you use linear regression or Shapley values, you're looking at historical data, right? That's all what you have. The idea is the assumption that we're making is the future kind of looks similar to historical past. That usually is valid if you don't have like market events, like some unexpected market event. So example would be is, think of this, like this year when we were doing the planning, we didn't expect COVID to happen. If COVID was not there, then I think we can use historical data to inform future. But given that COVID happened, like the way we tackled it is, you see what happens during COVID and then run like more models to be able to incorporate some of the COVID-related data. That's how we have addressed it. But that's not a linear regression or a shape. The problem is same for both linear regression as well as Shapley stuff.
That's true. I guess how you could address that would be when you get your model, you could run simulations, right? You could run what happens if, right? If you want to be forward-looking and say, okay, what happens if we spend next year 5% more in marketing, right? So how would that affect our sales across the line? Or what would happen if we spent more in TV and less in social? And then you could reduce it percentage-wise, or you can shift it. So that's something you can do too, right? I mean, we ran those simulations. So
Michael,
well,
you can potentially do that, but Michael, you can potentially do all of those things. But the way I'm interpreting this question is, let's just say you take a particular media channel like social, right? It has a certain response curve, right? Let's say COVID strikes, right? That response curve itself could change. You would not be able to predict that in advance unless you have a similar market event that happened like in one of those years. I'm interpreting the question that way.
Yeah. I mean, both ways. Like you cannot change the weights. That's correct. So if the answer you want to hear is VJs, that's correct. You cannot change the weights. If you want to change your spending and assume that the weights from the last model are correct, then you can change that and use that in order to be forward-looking, I would say. Though there could be 2 answers to that question, I think. I don't know. But hey, I hope we answered it. If not, please write us an email. We're happy to talk about it.
Great.
Okay.
Well,
so
just want to say thank you to Akhil, Vijay, and Michael for taking the time today and doing a great presentation. I'd like to thank everyone who joined us today as well. The presentation slides and the recording will be made available on our Bright Talk channel shortly, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, Vijay. Thank you, Akhil.